So with the release of Thor Ragnarok, it is Marvel Week here on Sean Chandler Talks About. I ranked all 17 movies in under 10 minutes, which is tricky for me because I like to talk a lot. Then I talked about the Hulk movies, I talked about the Thor movies, and now for Veterans Day, and as requested by one of my patrons, Charlie McGregor, we are talking about all of the Captain America movies. Now for the ranking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the theatrically released movies, but I'm also going to spend a little bit of time talking about the 1940s serials as well as the 1970s TV movies. So with all that said, be sure to put your ranking down below in the comment section. And if you've seen the serials, if you've seen the 70s movies, throw them in on your list, kind of give me your take on all of it. So my two runners up on here that don't make my ranking because they weren't actually movies made for the theater, we're going to start talking about the 1944 serials. Now these were played in the theater. That did happen, but they weren't actually a movie. They were like these little 15 chapters, each of them like 10 to 20 minutes long with these little adventures. And it's like a different take, very much so, on Captain America. I mean, this is very early on. This is even before Marvel Comics was called Marvel Comics when these came out. This is the synopsis from Wikipedia. The serial sees Captain America, really District Attorney Grant Gardner, trying to thwart the plans of Scarab, really Museum Curator Dr. Cyrus Maldor, especially regarding his attempts to acquire the dynamic vibrator, that's an unfortunate name, and electronic firebolt, devices that could be used as super weapons. So you hear the description of that. Wait, that's not Steve Rogers. That's not what Captain America is. Like, what's this plot about? A museum curator? So this is very early on superhero stuff, but in a sense, this is the first live action rendition of a Marvel character, even predating Marvel in that name. And so it's interesting as a historic thing. If you see the footage, it's kind of tough to watch. I've never actually sat through all 3 hours or so, or however many minutes long the entire thing is, because that's a lot of old 40s serials for me. But it's interesting nonetheless. Then our next one coming up on the list is that back in 1979, there was a TV movie and a sequel came out that second year called Captain America and then Captain America 2, Death Too Soon. And once again, the concept here does not really follow along with the traditional understanding of who Captain America is. So just once again, reading from Wikipedia, Steve Rogers is a contemporary man whose father was a 1940s government agent. The very patriotic attitude of Steve's father earned him the nickname Captain America. His father was later murdered. Rogers, a former Marine, now making a living as an artist traveling the countryside in a conversion van, is inspired by his father's story to sketch a superhero. After receiving potentially fatal injuries in an attempt on his life intended to seem like an accident, he is administered an experimental chemical called the flag formula. Now you hear that, you can see a couple of small things that are kind of similar to Captain America, but a totally different version of it. These are TV movies that look like TV movies that were more about their gizmos and gadgets and motorcycles and all sorts of weird stuff that you don't think of when you think about Captain America. Once again, it wasn't released in theaters. It was never intended to be released in theaters. I guess reading the Wikipedia page, I think it was released in France or something like that. Something very random happened with at least one of these movies. But I've tried to sit through them before and a little bit tough. I didn't make it. So once again, they weren't theatrically released, so they don't make my official ranking. But as we're about to get started with the actual official ranking one final time, put your ranking down below in the comment section. And now let's get started. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Captain America 1990. Now, this one's tough for me. I grew up watching this movie. Of all the Captain America movies, this is the one that I've seen probably by far the most. If you take as many times as I've seen First Avenger, Winter Soldier, Civil War, and double that, that's probably as many times as I've seen this movie because I grew up watching it. I had it recorded off HBO on a VHS tape, and it was pretty dumb. So I didn't know how bad it was at the time. I knew it wasn't great. I knew it wasn't like the Batman, Superman stuff I'd seen before, but I didn't know just how bad it was. And to be fair to it, I am not so nostalgic, so it might kind of taint my viewing of it. You can read some articles calling this the worst superhero movie of all time. It's not. You can check out the stuff done by Screen Junkies, and they'll point out some of the hilarious stuff, and it's same with Hilariosity from Chris Stuckman. They'll point out some hilarious stuff. It's not as bad as you think it would be, while at the same time being as bad as you think it would be. Like the general tone of it is not that's not the problem. The most basic structure of it, the basic idea of Captain America in the 40s, battles Red Skull, fails, is frozen. Red Skull has this criminal empire that runs throughout the decades. That's not the problem. And like there's several things like that that kind of work. But the actual specific scenes, the logic within scenes is so bonkers and so like comic booky in the bad sense. So the movie starts off, Steve Rogers tries to fight Red Skull, fails. And so in true comic book cartoon fashion, Red Skull attaches Steve Rogers to a missile from Europe and shoots it at the White House. And Captain America starts kicking the missile and diverts it off. And there's a little boy that was like, I'm going to sneak off and take a picture of the White House. So he's standing at the White House taking pictures as this rocket flies up, takes a picture, and then Steve Rogers kicks the missile. It goes off course, lands in Alaska, 4,000 miles away, and that's how he gets frozen. That little boy, he grows up to be the president. Later in the movie, Steve Rogers rescues the president, and the president goes, remember me? We're buddies. We met before. Now, met before is a bit of an exaggeration. And Steve goes, oh, wow, you were the little boy down by the White House. Makes no sense whatsoever. And like there's a scene in it where Steve's trying to escape on a bike. He goes off of a cliff into water, and the bad guys are chasing them. And so they just stay underwater for like 30 seconds. And the bad guys are like, I guess they're dead, and walk off. And then their head pops up. And like this sort of logic where you go, that's not what would have happened. They would have waited out. They would have looked around. Just every single scene's like that. Throughout the whole movie, the bad guys can always find Steve Rogers. So he wakes up in Alaska and starts wandering through the wilderness. The bad guys find him in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere. They show up with helicopters, motorcycles ready to go, chasing him. The whole movie's like this, just this internal logic that makes no sense. There's some easy stuff to pick on it, like his ears on his costume are rubber. They didn't just cut holes for his ears. His ears are rubber. The action scenes are just cut to pieces. There's this infamous shot. In some of the other reviews, people have counted the exact number of cuts in the sequence because it's so obviously ridiculous what's going on. So all in all, it's really frustrating because I have so much nostalgia for it. I want to be more positive towards it. And it's like the tone is right. It's got some great actors in there with Ronny Cox and Ned Beatty, the dad from A Christmas Story. And it feels like it should be so much better than it is. It's almost like you could see where this could have been a good movie. And actually, Screen Junkies did a video where they interviewed the writer of it. Apparently his script, of course the screenwriter's going to say this, his script was much better than the movie that they made, and they changed things. And there's this running gag in the movie where Captain America 2 times gets out of a car and goes, I feel sick, and then jumps into the car and drives off. And then something similar happens a 3rd time in the movie. And things like that. He's like, I didn't write that in the script. That was all the director. And so it's just one of those ones where you could see where even with the budget that they had, with a better script, this movie so close to being to the category of good. It feels like this movie could have been good with some basic logic, basic easy changes, basic changes in how they edited it, and the movie suddenly jumps up like 4 points. But as is, it really is a bad movie. But before I move on to my top 3, and you could have guessed what was going to be in my top 3 before you clicked on that video, I'm going to shamelessly plug the #1 way you can support my channel, and that is supporting me on Patreon. That's a community where you can directly support my channel in exchange for perks such as kind of being able to request videos. Like this video you're watching right now was requested by a patron. I wasn't thinking I was going to do it because I didn't want to do too many Marvel things. It was requested. It is happening right now because he requested it. Also, there's exclusive videos, some reviews, TV reviews, movie news, other sorts of rants, a couple exclusive ranking videos that I put over there just for my patrons. But also the key thing is if you just like my content, want to help me keep getting better at what I'm doing, that's kind of the big thing that kind of can happen when you support me. So if you check out some of my videos from last summer, I was like bright red. Someone actually left a comment, you look like a ripe tomato. And they were right, I did. It's because I didn't have proper lights. Since then, I've gotten proper lights and better equipment so that I can look like a human when shooting my videos. So if you enjoy my channel, want to help me make better content, want some of that exclusive content, want some access to some input into what's going on, please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Now let's get to my top 3. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Captain America, the First Avenger. this one right over here, right over my, which shoulder's over? Right over here, Captain America, the first Avenger. And so for me, the first hour of this movie is one of my favorite hours in all of the MCU. I love a good origin story. And Captain America, there's something special and different about him because so many heroes are reluctant heroes or people with dark, tragic past. He's just a good guy. He's a guy that wanted to serve and do the right thing. And because of that, they chose him for this project. And that's what makes him compelling to me. That's what makes him unique and different when you have so many different heroes with these tragic, dramatic stories. And then you have him, a good guy. And you see that throughout that first hour of what that kind of looks like in his trying to make things happen when people are, Tommy Lee Jones is telling him no in true Tommy Lee Jones fashion as it kind of progresses and he becomes Captain America and he's not allowed to be Captain America. All these sorts of things just work so well for me. In the musical score, Joe Johnston's kind of the way he shot it and giving it like both this period piece feel, but this wacky kind of comic-y feel. All of it just works so nicely for me, coming together so well with a wonderful cast. Chris Evans is one of these guys that when I first heard he was cast, I was like, Chris Evans? The guy from Not Another Teen Movie? Human Torch? Not so sure about this. And then he just absolutely kills it. The special effects, there's a couple shots that don't look quite right when they're doing the shrinky-dink version of him. But for the most part, you're looking at it and it works really well. Like your brain knows that's not him. And so it's kind of doing some like, what am I looking at right now at times? But the actual effect itself, it's really, really good. It's much better than like the Tolkin stuff that they've done in Star Wars recently. Then he rescues the POWs after this great action sequence. He comes back and the movie montages through the middle act. And the middle act happens to be World War II, this fertile ground for amazing storytelling, amazing adventures. You could tell multiple movies just in World War II, but because this movie has to get to the conclusion of him being an ice, and we want to actually have him be a hero in World War II, and this is one of the problems with that 1990 Captain America movie. His first mission, he gets frozen and gets sent to present time. He actually never, in the movies, doesn't get to be really a hero and be successful until the very end of the movie. So this movie wants to make sure we establish Captain America is a known person that was a hero that did amazing things. And so 4 years are montaged and you just watch it and you go, oh no. And the trailer like shows these clips of these big battles and sequences. And I remember watching the show, oh, that's going to be awesome. That's going to be awesome. And then you watch the movie and the trailer's montaging thinking things in the movie. But the movie just montages that stuff. It's just, this is a pretty easy trailer stuff. Just take this whole chunk, put it right there in the trailer. Boop, there it is. And then you get to the third act of the movie and Captain America, having lost his dearest friend that was his defender when he was being bullied, he goes, confronts Red Skull. You got this powerful stuff with Peggy that gets my wife tearing up every single time. Like they just wanted one dance and they didn't get to dance. And so there's emotional impact to it. He has a sacrifice, so it's a satisfying third act, amazing first act, but the way they structured it, it just feels like they had 2 or 3 different movies and we had to set up the Avengers. We had to get to the Avengers, so this movie had to montage through something. I just don't think the way, their balance of it, what they went with it, kind of hurts it for me. And so I really like this movie. It's very good. It just, as you can't get into that great category for me if there's such a big problem with the middle act of your movie. And that's what this movie has. It's got 2 great acts and a problem act right there in the middle. So this one comes in third place as the weakest of the MCU Captain America trilogy for me. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Captain America Civil War. Now, for me, this is a movie that I am just so happy that exists. And it's the type of movie that can only exist because of what they've done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and having all these characters, all these movies, so much time passing so you can build up these sorts of tensions, worldviews, different perspectives on life. And that's what they've done throughout all this. So when you get to the movie Civil War, you fully understand the 2 perspectives of Tony and Steve. You understand fully why each of them believe what they're doing. And you can look back at the previous movies and what they happened in their previous films that you would go, yeah, they would come to this point in time. So for Steve, you're talking about a guy who has a very strong moral compass, who has seen governments turn evil and do horrible things. He's seen the bad, but he trusts himself. He knows he's the good guy, in these big government things, he doesn't trust that oversight. Tony, however, you look at Ultron, you look at the previous films, he has very bad judgment. He is impulsive. You look at into Iron Man 3, he does stupid stuff. He can't trust himself. He needs oversight to make sure that he's not screwing things up. And you can look at each of their perspectives and go, that makes sense. Why two people that want the same thing, bad guys to be stopped. They want to work together to stop those bad guys, but how they do it, that's real conflict. That's true drama. That's interesting stuff. And then just because we've got all these characters, we can bring them in, and it makes sense in this populated world that you could be like, let's bring Ant-Man in. Let's introduce this new guy, Spider-Man. You can do that because they laid so much groundwork in the world building they've done up to this point in time. So you get to this movie, and you get that airport sequence. And it's just this amazing, amazing sequence. It's a dream come true for any comic book fan ever, seeing all these characters come together in a single scene and battle it out. And it's not like it's 5 minutes. I mean, it's this long, extended sequence of amazing things where everybody gets a moment to shine. Everybody gets a funny line. Just such a cool sequence. And maybe the best battle in all the MCU, that level of quality in kind of what they did there. And so amazing that they're able to make this movie, amazing conflict and tension, a set of characters, dream come true type moments, true conflict, drama where you care about things. The reason it's not number one, we got two problems. Number one is our bad guy Zemo feels unnecessary. Because of all the things that they worked out with, actually you believe that these two guys would battle it out, that there'd be these two different factions. Zemo feels like an afterthought, like he's just there to kind of like push the dominoes over, but their different worldviews set the dominoes up. So you could have had that opening sequence be a scenario where Tony did something that caused something to make Captain America, like you could have rearranged a little bit different. So he seemed a little bit unnecessary. Number two, we didn't get the stakes that we needed. We needed something. Rhodes needed to die. Something needed to happen. In the comic book Civil War, Captain America actually dies. I mean, that's the level to which some of this has worked in the past. And so it felt like another movie where Marvel couldn't go all the way there. So, we killed off Nick Fury in the past. We killed off Coulson in the past. And then they come back. And we're here once again. And Civil War, it's supposed to be this intense conflict. And they didn't go quite as far as I think they needed to go to give it the weight that the movie had earned. They'd earned going really far, and they didn't quite go there. But overall, I mean, it's an amazing film with so many cool things that it's a dream come true to live in an era where we have movies like this, especially if you're kind of like 15 to 25 and you're just growing up in this era of the MCU. I grew up in an era where 1989, I get Batman. Awesome. 1990, we get that Captain America movie I just talked about. A few years after that, we get the Fantastic Four Roger Corman thing that was like garbage that came out. And so you're living in an amazing era where you get movies like this and they're actually good. They're really, really, really good, and you get them constantly. But coming in at number one, the one that was the best of this batch of really, really, really good, great comic book movies is going to be Captain America Civil War. This is a movie that, even from the trailers, I wasn't going into it super excited. I liked Captain America, the first one. As I said, I really liked it. It was very good. And I was hoping that they would find a way to do more with World War II. And so I was hoping something like that. And I was like, what are they, this Winter Soldier and Bucky? I don't know about that. And we're bringing more characters into it. I was really nervous. And then the movie is just so well crafted. Probably the best crafted film of the whole MCU. The one that just the different pieces and the structures of the story and the tension, the drama, let's bring new characters in that makes sense, and just kind of worked it fine-tuned to just a well-crafted movie that shows what you can do with a comic book movie that is true to what you want with the spectacle, the action, the comedy from a Marvel movie, as well as the way you can craft a story that's not just bad guy shows up, wants to blow up city, must be stopped. Like, you can do more than that and explore things and have mythology, and you can have wacky comic booky type stuff like a talking computer head thing, and Bucky coming back as this ageless soldier that's been on ice and brought out to kill people. You can do all that and have dense drama. And you can bring in guys like Robert Redford to play this political figure and have huge stakes in the upturn of S.H.I.E.L.D. Does so many things so well. And as you watch it, it has some of the absolute best action and the way it's shot and choreographed. And it's just because it's like people doing stuff, it's a little bit more visceral and real as opposed to big CGI thing, doing thing to CGI thing. Like this, you feel the action that the Russo brothers captured in this movie for throughout the whole film. Bringing in Steve and putting it with Black Widow, you get two people that can kind of do that, and Falcon brings this perfect kind of mix of, and it works. It's like you feel like this is the best we've seen Steve Rogers, is best we've seen Black Widow, and they're just elevated by the material and the scenario, and they just like cracked the code of how do we use these characters right. And so many things kind of come together with this film to just make for, as I said before, possibly the best crafted film of the entire MCU from beginning to end. It's not my favorite. If you see my other ranking videos, it's not my favorite. It's very high up there, and all those they have different things about them that make them in my like all my top 7 on my MCU ranking. People are like, why did you put this one in your top 3? Why is this one in your top 3? Because there's 7 I want in my top 3. There's 7 of them that are really, really good to me and have very few kind of issues with them and have really high highs, and their lows aren't so bad at all. So I can only put so many in the top 3. And so this is a great movie that I thoroughly enjoy. So that's my ranking of all of the Captain America movies with some discussion of the serials and the TV stuff. How about you? Tell me your thoughts on it down below in the comment section. Let's have a lively discussion. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, as you've been watching right now. Coming up next week, we're going to switch into DC mode because we got Justice League coming out. And so it's a fun month, November, having both a big, great Marvel movie coming out, and hopefully DC will also have a great movie. We'll see what happens. That's coming up in just a few days. We'll have lots of DC content. And as always, thank you so much for watching.